It was only last year when New Balance released a great new model called the Tekela V4 Pro Low Edition. And now in 2024, they've refreshed the line with the V4 Plus that I have here. So in this video, I'm gonna go into all the features of these boots and talk about what's changed and what stayed the same. And at the end of the video, I'll also discuss whether or not they're gonna be a good option for you. And if you're interested in picking up a pair, you can find links to them in the description with exclusive discount codes. So to kick things off, let's talk about the design of these boots. So starting off with the upper of the V4 Plus, it's going to feature pretty much the same hypoknit upper that we saw on the previous V4. And honestly, this is one of my favorite synthetic uppers on the entire market. It has a really nice softness to it that almost reminds me of a more leather-like material, and while it's really flexible, it doesn't feel flimsy at all. It has a nice amount of sturdiness to it. Then running through the center of the football boot and around the collar, you're gonna have this great elasticated knit material that's gonna fit really snug around your foot. It has a similar one-piece upper design to the laceless variation, but the main difference is obviously going to be the addition of that lacing system. Then on both sides of the football boot, you are going to notice some textured elements that are very similar to what was featured on last year's Tekela V4, however, they have a slightly different shape. But the goal of those textured elements is ultimately just to give you a little bit more grip on the ball when you're shooting or passing. Then you're also going to have a really subtle crosshatch material towards the front of the toe box here that also adds a nice little bit of texture. And then just inside the heel, as you can see with this orange area here, you're going to have a nice thick padded heel liner. And then inside the football boot, you're going to have New Balance's Fuel Cell insole, which does feel really soft, but that being said, I don't really think it's different than almost any other insole you'd find. Then moving on to the back of the football boot, you're going to have pretty much an identical nylon outsole to the sole plate on the previous version. And it's a really unique outsole that you're not going to see on pretty much any other pair of football boots because it has these conical studs all throughout the center of the boot, and then towards the edge of the sole plate here at the perimeter, you're going to have these sharper bladed studs. Now, the main reason that New Balance have added these slightly shorter bladed studs around the perimeter is so that when your foot is digging into the ground at an angle, you're going to get a little bit more traction and responsiveness. And then the tooling of the sole plate is going to be fairly rigid with a little bit of snap up towards the toe box. So overall, barring a few aesthetic changes regarding the colorways and the shape of the textured elements, this is ultimately a very similar football boot to last year's Tekela V4. And I also want to note that the design just feels very premium, and at just $215, the build quality and the overall construction definitely rivals boots that cost $60, $70 to $80 more. Next up, let's talk about the fit and feel. These boots are tremendously comfortable, and honestly, it's really hard to find negative things to say about the fit of these boots. They're really easy to slip on and off, and as soon as you do get them on, that knit collar just feels so soft and snug around your ankle. And for me, the length was absolutely perfect, so I got these in my standard size 10.5 US, and my toes had just about maybe half a centimeter or so at the end of the boots, so they weren't so short that they were crushing my toes, and they weren't too long that I had any extra space. So if you are planning on picking up a pair, I would definitely recommend going true to size. And as is usually a strong point when it comes to New Balance football boots, the width of these boots, especially across the toe box, was amazing. I think when it comes to having a comfortably shaped toe box at the front of the football boot, there's no other big brand that does as good a job as New Balance. And keep in mind that New Balance offers all of their football boots, including the new Tekela I have here, in both standard and wide variations. And I have pretty wide feet myself, and the standard width variation here was more than accommodating enough for me. And as I mentioned earlier, the synthetic upper here just feels so great on your feet. It feels like it has the perfect amount of thickness to the point where it doesn't necessarily have a flimsy barefoot feel, but it's not so thick to the point where the upper feels rigid, which I personally think is a problem that the new Predator Elite can run into. Then the lockdown feels really great and secure from a combination of both the elasticated collar that you have around the ankle here and the addition of that lacing system. And I also feel that the thickness of the padded heel liner helped improve the comfort and lockdown in that ankle area. And I touched on this when talking about the design, but these boots just feel so premium, just like a top of the line model should. But next up, let's talk about what they were actually like to play in. So similar to last year's model, these are going to give you a lot of sensitivity and a really clean touch on the ball. And I think one of the reasons you get a nice touch on the ball with the Tekelas is going to be the balance of textures that you have on this football boot. It's not an incredibly sticky upper that's going to grab the ball when you put them on fresh out of the box, but it also doesn't have too much of a slick or a matte finish to it. It's almost somewhere in between. For me personally, I'm usually not a huge fan of overly sticky uppers, so this upper works really well for me. But nevertheless, I do like the addition of the textured elements that you get on both the outside of the foot and the inside of the foot. I do think they're going to help you just a little bit when you're trying to make those curved shots or curved long balls. Then when it comes to the sole plate, this also felt great and it offered more than enough aggression for the playing surface I was on. And honestly, even though I was playing on artificial grass, I felt really comfortable with this sole plate because all of the studs that are making contact with the ground are gonna be these conical studs that you see throughout the middle of the boot, and that's because the bladed studs that are towards the perimeter here are just a bit shorter. But it is important to note that if your foot is going to be at a sharper angle, maybe if you're pushing off for a sprint or making a sudden change in direction, there is a higher likelihood that these bladed studs are going to be engaged, so that might mean that they're not going to be the best football boots for all artificial surfaces. So while I personally felt pretty safe playing with these on artificial grass, it would be cool if New Balance released a variation that had a more AG-friendly sole plate. And then I think maybe the only area where I could be a little bit critical when it came to playing in these boots was that there was a little bit of friction towards the heel area, but honestly, after I tightened up the laces a little bit more towards the front of the boots, I didn't notice that problem as much, and I have noticed a couple times in the past with New Balance boots, the first time and maybe the second session when I'm playing in them, I might have a little bit of irritation in the heel, but it does go away really quickly, so I don't think for most people it's going to be a big problem. And overall, these were so much fun to play in. They're the kind of boots where once you get them on, you almost forget that you're wearing them and you can just focus on the game. Next up, let's talk about the value. So value is going to be another really strong selling point for the Tekelas here. And that's because the full retail price for the Tekela V4 Plus here is going to be $215, which already makes them considerably cheaper than other top-end competitors. And on top of that, despite the fact that they've only been out for a couple months, you can already find these on sale below their retail price. And as I mentioned earlier, these already have the materials and build quality that you would normally see from $250 to $300 football boots. And New Balance has always been on top when it comes to value, and the Tekela V4 Plus is no exception to that. So where does the Tekela stand amongst the competition? So the Tekela V4 Plus here is just a great all-around football boot, and I think it would do really well when put head-to-head against any other model. But because of the style of this boot, I think it's most likely to be compared against the Phantom GX2 from Nike, the Predator Elite from Adidas, and the Puma Future 7. And while all of those boots I just mentioned are great in their own way, there could be some reasons you might want to consider the Tekela instead. First off, if you have wider feet or you just want a football boot that has a slightly more comfortable anatomically shaped toe box, the Tekela is going to be the way to go. Now the Puma Future 7 is actually almost on par in terms of both comfort and value, but I think the lockdown on that boot isn't quite as good as the Tekela here, therefore the performance isn't quite on the same level. Now, if you personally want a football boot with a crazy sticky upper, then the Nike Phantom GX2 is still going to be the best football boot for you. But me personally, since I like not quite as sticky of an upper, something that doesn't grip the ball like crazy fresh out of the box, personally, I find this upper works a little bit more for me. And a similar thing can be said for the new Predator Elite from Adidas. You are going to get a little bit more grip from the rubber elements that are on those Predators, but at the end of the day, you're still going to get a decent amount of traction out of the Tekelas, and overall, your technique is still going to make a much bigger difference than the material of the upper itself. And both the Predators and the Phantoms are about $60 more expensive than the Tekelas here, and I just don't really think that that price increase is justified. So at the end of the day, whatever boot you put these up against, they're going to be pretty hard to beat. So what are my final thoughts on the Tekelas? So even though it is relatively early in the year, I can already tell that these are going to be among my favorite boots of 2024. Because for me, the most important things I look for in a pair of football boots are going to be comfort and performance. And the Tekelas deliver on those so well. And on top of that, aesthetically, I think they look pretty good as well. So New Balance is still killing it, and I'm really excited to try new models from them in the coming months and years. And that is going to do it for this video. Let me know if you've gotten the chance to try on these boots and what you think of them. Also, I'm doing a giveaway at 10,000 subscribers for a brand new pair of football boots, so if you want to enter, just click the link below. All you've got to do is be subscribed and fill out the information in the form. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.